when I think of material, I think of all of the wonderful complexity of material and materials in their origin, where they come from, and what we don't know about them. And in that not knowing, I often find space as a designer to interrogate pieces and bits and parts of knowledge that I'm missing. And wood represents one of these fundamentally, I believe, misunderstood materials or not known materials. The most amazing thing about wood is that it surrounds us continuously. I would imagine on your island, there's a supply chain that exists for that wood, and one that perhaps we don't understand. We don't fundamentally understand.
No.
So materials for me are important in that they represent some of the most wonderfully misunderstood complexities of our planet. There's a lot to be learned there.
And traditionally, there wasn't the desire to research wood in the same way as perhaps other materials. And so it's not until recently the whole idea of engineered timber and things has come to pass. And that sort of idea of actually using timber economically and sensibly, and so they can use the offcuts and all the rest of it.
Sure.
That's revolutionary and long overdue. And the fact that it happened with other things, but timber was just, oh yes, you had a big lump of timber and you used it, sort of thing. Well, that age is gone. But to try and use it sensibly and intelligently is, I think, part of the way of the future, or should be. Yeah.
The nature of a material informs the design primarily based on its attributes. And we can believe that those attributes are specific to only the things we might be interested in. So for instance, in a 2x4, it's primarily a structural member. It's rated for structural use. And if that was all it was good for, then that would be the primary attribute that we would be looking for. But with wood, you do have this amazing other attribute list associated with it. Its smell, its texture, its grain, its color. So when you look at choosing a material, I think often we come to that material with a very specific attribute that we're looking for. But we should probably be open to finding other attributes.
For me, it's the joy that you can play by using skins that you can twist in plywood and sort of generate beautiful forms that do have a history that goes back. And building timber structures goes back in some civilizations, the Nordic ones and things. I've seen some beautiful old churches and things. So for me, sort of the place where I live is almost a sort of, well, it's a very Anglophile sort of place where it has half the heritage listed buildings still extant in Australia are on that island down there. They got preserved by neglect. And the timber, which is a prime component of them, is in fact part of that cultural history as well as everything else. So playing with that and adding to that in a small way is a very rewarding thing.
Mm-hmm.
People need to feel things as much as sort of have knowledge about them. And if you can actually feel a passion for the things you're working with and the materials and that, then that will come through and that will be communicated to the we're talking about cultural value of these things.
Yeah.
I think that does come through, and it's part of what we hand on as the next ideas for following generations.
What I really appreciate about these comments and many of the comments that you've made is that you've indicated that there is a value to the kind of knowledge we gain by purposing our bodies to interact with materials. Often architects are handed the numbers that describe a material. And when we're handed those numbers, we forget that we too can purpose our bodies to interact with those materials. Prototyping is one of the most powerful ways we can begin to understand wood or steel or plastics or any material. So the way, the kind of advice that I give myself even is to not necessarily believe the numbers and to remember that I can learn so much by purposing my body to interact. You use the word craft again and again in your comments, and that says something about what we do with our hands and our brains simultaneously.
Yes.
the numbers are incredibly important in that we learn more about those numbers by interacting with the materials, and we begin to corroborate why they exist and what they're there for and how to use them, but they aren't the materials themselves. So that's the advice I would give a student, myself every morning when I wake up, another architect. How do we begin to understand the limitations of the numbers and the limitations of the building products that we receive, and how do we work them together?
It's immensely rewarding because you're actually touching, again, I'm just aware of just how much the history of these things go back hundreds and thousands of years.
Hundreds and thousands. The Egyptians built wooden boats that are incredible puzzles of geometry. Some of my favorite pieces of architecture are the Pharaoh's boats.
I agree with you. Yeah.